Hey, this is Gooms, your editor. This took a while, but considering what's been happening in the news lately, I hope you understand. Stay safe out there. Anyway, for those of you who aren't aware, Designing 4 is actually a two-man team. Myself and Pierre Kong, who you probably know as the lovely voice in most of our videos.
Yeah.
To celebrate over 10,000 subscribers, we figured we'd share with you our top 10 favorite games lists and release them separately. So be sure to check out Pierre's list after you watch this one, unless you already watched it, in which case, welcome. Fair warning though, a lot of these are from my childhood as a Nintendo kid. That's not to say I don't love many other games dearly, but when something's that formative, it's gonna leave a strong impact on you. This is more about what's personally important to me than it is about making some kinda definitive list of the best games. That list wouldn't mean anything anyway, since it's trying to please so many people that it doesn't accurately reflect any of their views, but yeah, hope you enjoy, and Pierre will return to narrate most of this video, except for a bit where it gets a bit more personal. Have some honorable mentions.
Super Mario Galaxy, in some ways, was a metamorphosis for Nintendo. Everyone knew it'd happen eventually. They might have guessed it Super Mario Universe more often, but after exploring a land and a world and a 64, the next logical step would be to explore the cosmos. But it also showed a different perspective toward their flagship franchise. Fully orchestrated, beautiful music instead of the chiptunes we know so well. More variety than ever before, with galaxies that were not only distinct, but numerous as well. More than 2 boss fights per game that are actually worth a damn. Absolutely gorgeous visuals for its time, sold entirely through art style, sense of scale, and lighting effects, in spite of the Wii's horrible lack of technical strength. And, for those willing to experience it, a surprisingly tragic story about a girl that lost her mother, but pushed through it to become the mother of the cosmos itself? Sign me up. But I think what's most appealing about Galaxy, to me, is its sense of melancholy that permeates its entire identity. In the music, in the sense of scale, and yes, in the storybook. It's all grand, sure, but it's a tragic grandness, one that makes you feel incredibly small as you float in awe of the ever-expanding reach of the cosmos. And it's brilliant, because not only does this create such an unusual mix of ennui and wonder that I'll never get from other Mario games, but it's better from a gameplay perspective too, because that allows the devs to put almost the entire emphasis on the levels themselves, experimenting with exploration and linear obstacle courses, minigames and traditional platforming, power-ups of all kinds, all sorts of level design goals. Later Mario games would still experiment with level design, and they do it well. But those games always felt like fun was their entire goal, to simply deliver a good time for a couple of days and then be done with it. The new Super Mario Bros. Series especially, which has been driven into utter stagnation for me, in spite of its technical proficiency. But Super Mario Galaxy had something to prove, to show that Mario could be more than just fun. It should still be fun, but at the same time, it's melancholy, awe-inspiring, humble, humbling, majestic, lonely, and grand too. Ultimately, Nintendo would abandon this path, which makes sense. A universe is a lot different than a galaxy in the eyes of a god, but they're both unfathomably huge things in the eyes of a human. So a video game ends up with little except diminishing returns. But in a way, The fact that it's the only one of its kind makes it that much more special to me. It's truly the pinnacle of everything the Mario series ever thought it would become. Umineko's a weird one, and depending on how I'm feeling each day, I might bump it up or down a few places. In fact, I was initially going to put Paper Mario on this list, the first game I ever cried at when it was over. But I think reading through Higurashi and Sekonya recently swayed my decision. I think that when I'm willing to be charitable and pay attention to the fascinating bits of philosophy, its deconstruction of writing, its wonderful cast of characters, the heartwarming artistic journey of its creator, and its OST that might be the best out of any video game ever made, Umineko really triumphs over its lesser aspects like the questionable final chapter and its horrendously slow pacing. Anyway, Umineko is a visual novel, and one that has absolutely no choices until its final chapter, hundreds of hours in. So someone that cares a lot more about definitions might not classify it as a video game at all. It's a murder mystery, but it's one that probably talks about its own construction more than delivers the mystery itself. No topic is off limits, from tips to solving the mystery, to what makes a good mystery, to debating whether it's worth solving the mystery in the first place, or if it'd be best to just let people believe as they believe. It's set up as an idiot arguing with a witch of an island where murders took place. The idiot only believes in naturalistic explanations, while the witch offers the much simpler solution of, yeah, a witch did it. But only if another solution is actually possible. So you can interpret the entire story as either one man's hallucination and arguing with himself for thousands of pages, or you can interpret it as a witch desperately trying to prove her existence using nothing but an inherently flawed method. Either way, it's fascinating stuff. And it's not just waxing philosophical either. Most of what Umineko talks about is incredibly relevant to real-world issues of what it means to believe and what it means to love. The religious parallels are obvious, but there's also talk of identity, class structure, gender identity, sexual preference, family hierarchies, power dynamics, incest, expression, what truth even means, possibly the most sympathetic serial killing I have ever seen. No topic is too taboo, but every topic is handled with surprising maturity and depth. And that candidness to just talk about absolutely anything and share its insight makes Umineko incredibly refreshing for me. At the best of moments, it absolutely nails its tone, shifting from tragic to hopeful to goofy to action-packed, totally effortlessly, like an amped-up Ace Attorney. To me, its themes are among the most universal of any work of fiction, and I don't think they could have ultimately been expressed in a better way. But I will reiterate, this is not a game for everyone. And if I didn't have nearly limitless amounts of patience, I would have never gone through it. But it's one that's a permanent fixture in my subconscious, and I treasure it deeply for that. And seriously, just listen to the OST. It goes crazy hard. I'm generally a pretty fair feather Zelda fan. I think most of them, including this game's much more beloved prequel, Ocarina of Time, lack a strong identity as they don't focus on specific design goals, instead trying to do most things adequately. I also think that there's a lot of obvious things you can point to as flaws in Majora's Mask. It only has 4 main dungeons, it reuses basically all of its assets from OOT, the opening might be a little slow, and Tingle's humor is divisive. But one thing you unequivocally cannot fault Majora's Mask for is focus. It knows what it wants to do and is willing to do absolutely anything, even stand in the way of its longtime fans, in order to achieve it. I respect the boldness, because it reflects my own views toward the value of art. The more unique things a game can get me to feel, the stronger of a success it is in my mind. I have little need for things like tradition or structure. Instead, I want them to go hard on what they feel would make the most interesting game possible. And sure, if they try to be interesting but fail, they can come across as pretentious. But luckily, Majora's Mask knows how to fire on those cylinders as well, telling a doomsday scenario that's almost a fraction as scary for the player as it is for the people within it. Because you only have 3 days to do everything, you really have to plan out your time effectively. And I absolutely adore that kind of time management in games. It makes each loop meaningful, as spending it on going through a dungeon or doing dumb mini-games or just staring at the moon approaching is your choice. It makes the characters meaningful, as you can see how they choose to spend their last moments of life, whether it be in complete denial, abject sadness, absolute terror, or just spending the time with the one they love. And it even makes the gameplay better, just because it's so fun to strategize and make the most out of the time you have. I know some see that as stressful, but I have always, even as a kid, seen it as rewarding instead. This is the first video game world that I truly got immersed into, wanting to learn more about, see how people would react, what cool masks I could find, and just enjoy all of the stuff it had. The game world might have been smaller than before, but it was so much more dense, with Clocktown probably being my favorite town in video games period, just due to the sheer amount of side quests, things to do, and new content to find. Every character in the town had their own schedule, which did wonders toward making them feel like real people. There were 3 amazing transformations, which just fed straight into my Rareware tainted brain as the coolest thing ever. Even better, there were tons of little details under the surface, like how there's more than a little racial tension this time around, or how the Deku Butler's son died without a word before the game even started, or the entire backstory of the Skull Kid, and what the inside of the moon even means. There's fewer dungeons, but the ones we did get are of amazing quality, requiring understanding not just individual rooms, but the entire structure of the dungeon itself. There's just so much discovery in this game. Discovery of tone, discovery of roots, discovery of items, and discovery of this wonderful, breathing world. Such a good game.
Fasten your seatbelts for Sony Computer Entertainment America production.
My favorite racing game and my favorite Switch game, which are both reasonably high accolades, but perhaps not as deserving as high of a ranking as this. No. Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled is this high simply because it's my favorite game to just play. You know, like as a video game. Because it has online and I'm decent enough to actually compete, if not often win, it's the game that shows the most promise to me of actually getting good at someday. After years of playing Mario Kart and Diddy Kong Racing, I finally found a game that had enough depth to keep me going for months at a time. No other game has managed to put that level of fluidity into a racing game besides Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing Transformed. And CTR's better because it integrates speed directly into your reserves and Power Slide and Blue Fire rather than being so reliant on boosts laid out on the track. That's nothing against those titles, honestly. I still love them dearly. But CTR just controls better, with how every turn is an opportunity to go faster rather than an opportunity to avoid slowing you down too much. Shortcuts are risky but rewarding. Items are strategic but still powerful. It has Diddy Kong Racing's Adventure Mode, which is an instant win in my book, but now it's treated as an introduction toward mastery in multiplayer, rather than the star attraction in its own right. CTR challenges teach you tricky jumps and shortcuts. Relic races teach you what lines to take and how to avoid hazards. Time trials optimize your play in a controlled setting, while cup and boss races add some unpredictability into the mix. Even the crystal challenges teach you how to use your brakes effectively, probably one of the most underrated skills in any racing game. It's just a constant, wonderful feedback loop of excelling in one challenge to get better at the others, with all modes adding toward your skill toolkit despite offering so much variety between them. And that's just the original game's content. With the remake, you get all of the tracks of Nitro Kart too. You get all sorts of new tracks, some of which rival the best in the series. You get tons and tons of new characters, skins for those characters, even a new character class that isn't overpowered, but excels at the new Ring Rally mode. A mode that lets newcomers adjust to the feeling of high-level speed, finally acting as a good bridge between the decades-long gap between casual and competitive. You can even choose whatever weight class you want, so if you want to play as Pura but prefer speed characters, you can do that. This game received a lot of love, being supported well into its life, continually getting more and more content to keep you going. And the game just works better for me as a competitive game than most, because the idea that you almost reached an opponent's place is much more encouraging than not being able to do anything for most of a fight when you get stuck in their 20-hit combo. You are on your own personal quest to get good, and other racers may interact with you and make your life difficult, but largely serve to add in some occasional unpredictability on your path, never preventing you from playing the game entirely. This game ate up several months of my life, and will continue to eat up several more, with none of it feeling wasted. I think that's a special feeling of continual growth and success, and one that not a lot of games can achieve. If I were ever trapped on a deserted island that inexplicably had power and good internet and I could only bring one game with me, I'd pick a game I could use to communicate for help. But assuming that's against the rules, I might pick Crash Team Racing. We all lived in a Pokémon world, and I wasn't a part of it. Much as it pains me to admit it, I was a little hipster as a kid, before I had any idea of what that meant. I joined special classes, clubs, band, not because I had a particular interest, but because it was a unique thing to do. Far more unique than those lousy sports all the popular kids liked. I would hold the door open for people walking into school for an entire half hour before it started. I had a stint where I tried to convince people that I was psychic, half facetiously, as some sort of rhetoric about how easily people could be fooled. I hated the color blue because it was the most popular, picking green instead. When I learned that 0.9 repeating equals exactly 1, you bet I was showing it off to everyone who dare disagree. You get the picture. The point is, I had trouble making friends and didn't like anything that was popular, and in retrospect was kind of an annoying little shit. So Pokemon came around, and it was all that anyone would ever talk about. Spending their entire lunch breaks trading cards, playing the game, presumably talking about the anime. But I'd never go that far, because I always noped right out of the conversation before it got to that point. Pokemon was absolutely massive, incomparable to anything before or since, taking up an entire third of all licensed merchandise, period, in its heyday. Every time I went to the bedroom store where my mom worked, it was absolutely infested with Pokemon comforters, clothing, you name it, and I was having none of it. As schools struggled to get kids to pay attention and avoid this Pokemon craze by banning cards or Game Boys, I felt more and more smugly self-assured, not letting myself get caught into this one-time fad that was clearly more important to kids than actual friendships. Until finally, I ran across just one little game. It actually looked fun and unlike anything I'd ever seen before. My first Pokemon game. And that game was Pokemon Snap. What? Not what you were expecting? And let me tell you, there probably couldn't have been a better introduction for me. The Pokemon were living and breathing, with their own behavior and personalities. The game was absolutely bonkers, with a concept absolutely nothing like any other game, being a sort of rail shooter and a sort of creative tool, but really its own thing. It was fun to learn just how these Pokemon would behave, especially for someone that didn't know that Magneton was a separate Pokemon, and therefore spent ages until I figured out, oh, I have to photograph Magnemite separately. Pokemon Snap isn't one of my favorite games these days. It's too small and too humble. But it was an important step in giving me a taste of that world, humanizing the Pokemon beyond a sprite, a move pool, and some statistics. So in karate class, I decided to finally stop being so damn haughty and actually watch one of the upper belts play the game proper. Since I did like at least one random spin-off in the series after all, and it looked fun. With real strategy, with near infinite customization, with a goal to work toward and tons of stuff to do along the way. I'd never played an RPG before, so to my young mind, the amount of options was absolutely staggering. Finally, after over a year into the craze, I decided to bite the bullet and ask for the version he was playing for my birthday, Pokemon Yellow. I was hooked. That same book from Pier's vid, I had 3 copies. 1 green, 2 red. I had the official walkthrough and the one for Stadium. My obsession with a card game specifically grew into one of my favorite things on its own, me being one of the only kids around who actually knew how to play. And I think Yellow helped me bridge that gap, even more than the other games. Pikachu had his own personality and was worth keeping around just to see his cute animations and have him walk behind you, and to make the game just a little bit harder. The gym leaders, while easy in retrospect, still had a lot of theming behind them to make beating Surge's Raichu with just your Pikachu feel rewarding if you wanted it to be. Gary's Eevee could change into one of 3 different things just based on your actions through the game. And while I don't disagree that it's probably more poorly designed than the vanilla versions of the game, as a kid, I never noticed. You see, since I was still that hipster kid at heart, I didn't use a full team of starters, just because I figured that was what everyone else must have done. Instead, I rocked this weird-ass team of Pikachu, Seadra, Parasect, Gengar, Dodrio, and one of Fearow, Raticate, or Butterfree, and I loved all of them. The starters, therefore, were just one more bonus, letting me get closer to completing the Pokédex as the world around me was starting to lose interest. For me specifically, Yellow was probably everything I would have wanted in a Pokemon game. And through bonding with Pikachu, probably what I needed to realize it was okay to like popular things. It just took me a little longer than most to realize it. Alright, that last one ran a bit long, so here's a more straightforward one. This game just makes me happy. It's a rare example of a 3D platformer without a lot of caveats to complain about, like Donkey Kong 64's collectibles, or Mario 64's camera, or Ukulele's everything. It just makes it look utterly effortless how it experiments from one concept to the next, every mission feeling wildly different from the others. Between actually great boss fights, hell, probably the single best one in any 3D platformer ever, melancholy time riffs based on the best part of Mario Sunshine, a goddamn survival horror mission, a text adventure where you play as a corgi? This game just adores fun, adores charm, wants you to always enjoy yourself, with tons of collectibles and Easter eggs if you want to look for them, but with the real meat being the missions themselves if you don't. Hat Kid's may be the most instantly endearing platforming mascot of all time, and how the game can just bounce between the mafia and signing deals with Satan and a murder mystery with a continual, limitless sense of irreverence and joy is just a wonderful thing. And any one of its worlds could easily be the very best in a lesser game. It controls phenomenally well, giving you just enough to control your landing, but without completely breaking the game open like Sunshine or Odyssey. And the scooter has a lot of hidden depth if you work to find it. The game encourages exploration, but varies the content so much that you're finding new things even if you get lost. It's got fan content, multiplayer, 2 new worlds, all sorts of stuff, just to make the game feel that much more complete. And it's all in this nice, humble, indie-sized package. It's a game I needed to validate that I really do deeply love its genre, in spite of all the justified criticism it's gotten over the years. Because for every game that just feels like a checklist, some end up feeling like a true adventure. And sometimes, that's all I really want out of a game. Pikmin is a quiet, existential little game. As much as he would have liked it, I don't think Miyamoto was ever expecting a 5-hour game about farming sentient carrot Marios on an alien planet and sending them into battle to be anything more than a modest success. And that's just what we got. Just another one of Nintendo's C-listers, brought back occasionally when they need something to fill the holiday season, but always sort of underperforming. To a certain extent, that adds to Pikmin's tragic beauty, as it's a game about life and how the world moves on, whether or not you're ready for it to. And honestly, as much as I love the core gameplay of the series, I don't think it really needed to go beyond the first title, since it's so self-contained and tightly delivered on its own. Sure, as a video game, it's very simple, with only 5 areas and only 3 of those being fully developed. It doesn't have as intricate of design as later games, nor as many characters, or even as many core ideas as they do. My favorite gaming codex of all time, the Piclopedia, is nowhere to be found here. And the fact that the distant planet is Earth all along is only subtly implied here, rather than made super obvious with the best use of product placement of all time. But the core themes are so strong in spite of, or perhaps because of, its simplicity. It's a game that relates to the experience of all life forms, just trying to survive day by day, enjoy the time they have until they inevitably die. The game is cute, but it's ultimately unflinching in the concepts of death and hopelessness, with killing all around you, losing many comrades along the way being your only chance to propagate and survive. This is the only game where the time limit feels like a real threat, and where a man's simple journey to get back to his family is all the motivation you need, rather than the cruel march of capitalism or a vague promise of scientific discovery. In spite of all its harshness, the game's undeniably beautiful, with Forest of Hope in particular standing out as one of my favorite video game compositions. And all of the life forms on this planet acting like you might expect some strange creature somewhere to act. There are no good guys or bad guys in Pikmin, only life itself. And with each passing day, with each new log you see, you get just a little bit of insight into the human condition in its purest form. The rest of this doesn't feel right for me to articulate in my own voice, so I'd like you to hear it in Gooms' words and text, in the tone it was intended. Thank you. I'm told that I played a game before this. Some PC game where you click things and things happened. I don't remember it at all. And asking my dad what the name of that game was didn't get me anywhere. So, for all intents and purposes, this is the first meaningful game I've played. Some of you may find this collection to be cheating, since it includes 3 of the most important Mario games ever made, and also 2 games named Super Mario Bros. 2. But I can't fully disassociate most of its games from the collection, just because that collection and the cartridge itself were so meaningful to me. And hey, Luigi got some new sprites out of it in Super Mario World, so it's technically better anyway. I just think the very fact that there was so much variety in and of itself was important to me growing up, since I could switch games if one got hard or if I felt like it. And I would spend an inordinate amount of time just on the title screen and menus. It all made the game somehow feel more complete, in a way not unlike Kirby Superstar. Also, saving. Saving was nice for the games other than Super Mario World that didn't already have it. As for the games themselves, they're Mario. You should know they're the best in the business. And Super Mario World and Mario 3 especially will probably always be favored over the new Soups, just because I value their experimentation in art and structure that much. Their momentum's also much stronger and more controlled, since every jump needs to be planned, every landing feeling earned, rather than being able to cheat just a little more with twirls and wall jumps and momentum-canceling ground pounds. I just love the speed of old school Mario, the control, the difficulty, the level concepts that you really grow to appreciate as you stick through a difficult section until you memorize and perfect it. And insofar as old school Mario is concerned, there's no better collection than this. I'm of the opinion that this is the best version of Mario 3, besides maybe the GBA port that I haven't played, because it has all the goodness of the original, but with much better control and some of the most lush backgrounds in the series. And Super Mario World was the big one, the quest that you tracked and learned all of the secrets on as you went, discovering alternate routes, learning its world, not being as much of a challenge as Mario 3, but being incredibly liberating in how flowing Mario's movement was. Mario 1 had a nice, simple charm to it, using a very tiny amount of assets in as many ways as it could, improving on the original with even better backgrounds than Mario 3, a banger remix of the Mario theme, and a neat preview of all the enemies that show up in the game you were about to face. Lost levels, available exclusively here and in All-Stars Vanilla for like 15 years, helped give the game a nice longevity into my adult years by actually being difficult. And in World 9 just being a wonderfully cute addition. And Mario 2 is just so different from the others, especially with its 4 wildly different characters, that it had a ton of value for that alone, even if I thought the core experience wasn't as good. Add in the secret Mario Brothers Versus game in Mario 3, helpful control diagrams for a kid that didn't have a manual, and a probably phenomenal price tag for my parents at the time, and you have a game that was an immensely important standby, much more so than the sum of its parts. I would go on to play and enjoy their original versions as well, but it's this collection that taught me that I love video games, that they've become my favorite pastime. Between the worlds they showcased, the feeling of success they delivered, and the challenges they helped me overcome. I honestly don't often mentally separate the collection, because that's what was most formative and most valuable to me, and what made me cherish my Super Nintendo dearly. In that sense, I always felt a little disconnected from the debate between Mario 3 and Mario World, because they were both deeply important and deeply connected in my mind, and both likely would have made my top 25 games individually. I mean, I'd probably choose Mario 3 with a gun to my head, but it varies a lot on my mood, and both do have their individual strengths and weaknesses.
I still don't really get what being strong means, but I'm gonna start by not lying to myself. No more being scared of everyone, hiding my hobbies, staying away from people. Anytime, any place, I'm gonna bust right through as my own self. That's the way to deal with that other me in the TV world.
It's no surprise that Persona 4 had a deep, undeniable connection to my friend and the channel's co-owner, Pyrrhic Kong. Thank you, I try hard. Unfortunately, I was always distanced from the game for one reason or another, between not owning a PS2, to hearing most of the game's moments secondhand already, to having a major falling out with the same friend group that I'd seen Persona 4 be spread to in the past. But underneath the surface, there was still something infectious about the game, or at least how Pierre sold it, with me knowing I'd absolutely adore it if the circumstances were right. I still remember Pierre once did a list comparing members of our old community to Persona 4 characters. I got Kanji Tatsumi due to my blunt, uncaring front hiding someone that really just wanted to be understood and accepted and just didn't know how to express it. And that really resonated with me at the time, even without direct exposure to who he was talking about. I knew I would get tons of depth out of planning out my schedule, in seeing how the characters would act, in watching the characters develop, because those were the exact things I'd adored in other games like Majora's Mask. And it basically had the same battle system as Pokemon, but with a little actual difficulty, apparently. I decided eventually to save the game for whenever Pierre and I would inevitably meet, thinking it would be a good bonding exercise. But then the pandemic happened, making an already difficult process nearly impossible for at least another year. And with Persona 4 Golden coming out on Steam, I caved, bought it, and set aside a month, knowing full well what I was about to get into. And I think what was most surprising for me was how unsurprising it was. I have a tendency to overthink things, making me sometimes enjoy things less than I would normally, as I look for flaws and put emphasis on them, perhaps undeservedly. That isn't to say there was nothing I disliked. A lot of the new Golden content in particular felt like fluff, or at times, even a little uncomfortable. But the things I enjoyed, the philosophy, the characters, the RPG combat, the time management, the emotion, that was all there, and I ended up loving it just as much as I hoped I would. I loved growing with Inaba, just getting comfortable in this small town and making the most out of the limited time I had, unable to do everything I wanted, forcing me to consider what was most important to me. I loved that every dungeon had something to learn from, something to apply to your own life, something to relate to and to let you know that it was okay to be yourself. The game just keeps going, but every time it decided to go on just a little bit longer, I was happy, because I get to spend that much more time with the cast. Hell, I even considered doing a second playthrough immediately, but didn't just because that'd be horribly irresponsible of me. It's a game where you get more out of it the more you put into it. And as someone who had infinite patience to tackle a game on its own terms, nothing could have been better for me. The only thing is, there is a small amount of melancholy that comes from playing the game so much later than my peers. I now have few people I can share or talk about it with. I had to tackle many of its themes purely on my own, without Persona 4 to make that process that much smoother. And leaving Inaba, when it inevitably did happen, now has a bittersweet tinge, more than being purely satisfying. I don't think this is really a problem, but it's different, and changes my perspective on the game and its messages of society and personal growth. It's now more of a reflection on how much choice paralysis used to hamper every aspect of my life, and a reminder of the progress I've made, as much as it is a teaching tool to help overcome it. It was an outlet to learn about characters like Rise, who I share little in common with but reflect the struggles of so many others I've come across. It was a confirmation that, yeah, Pierre was right. Kanji and I have a hell of a lot in common, both in how we express ourselves and in our insecurities. And in spite of how long it took me to actually play it, I think Persona 4 did reach me while I was younger, just in an ethereal way based on the community around me, where I loved what it was doing even if I myself was distanced from it. Actually crossing that bridge just gave me a really nice video game to attach all these feelings to, and I'm incredibly grateful for it. Yoshi's Island isn't a game I love to talk about. It's old, it exists far past the time that it'll resonate to the next generation of gamers in the same way it did to me, just because it's no longer a game you specifically seek out and cherish. It's one of many in an online collection that everyone criticizes due to Nintendo's incredibly slow, drip-feed method of distribution. Its themes make me look childish, blinded by nostalgia instead of more important concepts of artistic achievement and thematic merit. The rest of its series is frankly a disaster, with only one game feeling anything close to a worthy successor, and one travesty of a game that decides to rewrite the biggest emotional gut punch of Yoshi's Island for no particular reason. It's a very fragile game, and one where I worry that somewhere, someday, I'll lose my bond to it, as I hear just one more person that complains about Mario's whining or about the game's star timer, knowing they'll permanently be locked out of an experience I so treasure due to something I see as trivial. But honestly, I can't help it. Yoshi's Island has eclipsed its status as just a game for me, where most discussions I have on it dig down into the root, the core emotion that drives this game so much for me. Because Yoshi's Island is my childhood. In its art style, in its wonderfully inventive levels, in its incredible variety of boss fights, in its fun mini-games, in its absolutely stunning multi-layered backgrounds. It's my childhood in how it controls, putting you up to full speed instantly, but still annoying for incredible precision by feathering your movement and in using your flutter jump. It's childhood in how every transformation, every level tile, every enemy just oozes with charm, where it can decide to have a cannon walk around on little legs, or a ghost that's clearly not happy to be there, or a dizzy dandy that thinks he's got the most deliciously sneaky plan in the world, or a cactus that gets horribly depressed as soon as you take away its bouncy ball. And its childhood, and how me and my dad would cheese so much of the match card game, him always opting to remember melons and POW blocks while I took over magnifying glass and star duties. That 10-up always felt so sweet. Yoshi's Island was the source of many firsts for me. It was the first game I'd asked for specifically because Yoshi was my favorite part of Super Mario World and I like the color green. It's the first time I appreciated a level specifically for how it was structured. Marching Meidel's Fort, which would end up being the core conceit of the channel you're watching right now. It was the first game I completed as the levels grew higher and higher, from the grasslands to the hills, to the treetops, to the mountains, to the peaks, to the clouds, to the edges of space as you go just a little further, and then deep into the depths of Bowser's Kingdom, feeling more and more treacherous as it went on, but every level flowing seamlessly into the next. It was the first game I finished with 100% completion, and between its tough-as-nails bonus levels and wide array of collectibles, that was a considerable feat for a younger me. It was the first time I faced a boss that truly terrified me, the first time I laughed at a character's dialogue, the first time that a game felt like a wonderful, crazy, colorful world than just as a series of levels. And it's the first time a game truly eclipsed the simple fun that many games can achieve, as all of the wonderful experiences I'd someday go through in games and life were encapsulated into that one final message. Heroes are born. I told you earlier that my parents suffered a difficult divorce, and the split between before and after was a huge turning point in my life. Yoshi's Island wasn't my only game of that earlier period, but it is the most defining and my most cherished. It unequivocally brings me back to that simpler time, where games were all I had to worry about, where just reaching the goal was cause for celebration, and in remembering my past, it pushes me forward. In its simple message that even the greatest and most famous people of our time started from nothing. I think for most, its time has passed. The most I can hope for is you play it and enjoy it as a pretty, cute, well-designed platformer and leave it at that. But for me, it's an inexplainable joy. A pure happiness that I can't put into words. It's my favorite game. and one that I'll probably cherish until the day I die. Thank you for listening.